Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner Me episode, today I have a couple of very bizarre enigmas, folks. One, in South Carolina, a flying cryptid was seen that could possibly be Mothman, and another, Insectoids, mantis men were seen in Nevada. Let's get into the first article. Winged enigma in South Carolina, families terrifying encounters with man-sized flying creature. A late-night drive through rural Pickens County turned into a chilling brush with the unknown when a man swerved to avoid a massive leathery winged being that nearly struck his windshield. What began as one sighting soon became a family pattern, each member glimpsing the same winged entity near their home, hinting at something far stranger than a mere bat lurking in the Carolina night. This incident happened almost 12 years ago, though I can't recall the exact date. One night, while driving home from my girlfriend's house around 7:30 p.m., I noticed something flying toward my car in the night sky. It had leather-like wings and was almost as wide as my windshield. Unfortunately, I couldn't see it clearly because it was dark, but it had orange-reddish eyes and swooped upwards just before it nearly collided with my windshield. I was pumping the brakes the whole time, afraid it would crash into the car. I told my parents about it, but they tried to convince me it was just a bat. I insisted it was much too big for that. A year later, my dad mentioned that he had seen the same creature flying toward his car on the same road and at the same spot. My brother also had a sighting in our backyard while he was taking out some scraps. As he walked back from the fence, he noticed the shadow of something flying directly under the outside light, almost blocking it. He was taken aback by the shadow on the ground and then quickly heard movement in the trees, informed my dad, and they both went back outside, but they couldn't see anything in the dark. They felt as though something was watching them from the trees. So far, it sounds like it could possibly be a Mothman, folks, but no one mentions, any glowing red eyes, or the fact that maybe it basically just had its eyes and its shoulders. All they said that they saw this big bat-like entity, folks, but it does sound very similar to the Mothman accounts I've heard before. Do you think it has any relationship to, the Mothman that was seen in Point Pleasant or even in Chicago right now, folks? I would love to know, because whatever this creature is, it is very, very similar to those accounts, folks. But do you think that this entity encounter has any relationship to any other flying cryptids, like gargoyles, insectoids, or even maybe pterodactyls and dragon sightings? Because it does sound similar to those sightings as well, folks. Maybe because it was so dark, this entity was actually maybe not a Mothman, but maybe some sort of, lizard-like creature. Do you suppose, folks? I don't know. Either way, very interesting, but let's read on. None of us experienced anything like that again. I decided to share the story because of an article I read about flying dinosaurs, which might be what I saw, although I'm not entirely sure. I welcome any ideas or suggestions. I can only say that the creature was roughly the size of a man. This occurred during the winter season in South Carolina, RR. So even RR thinks it could have been maybe some sort of flying reptilian creature, folks. Very interesting. But everyone, there's also a note that came along with the article. Let's read it and maybe hear some more explanations and info on exactly what happened. I contacted RR for more information, and they clarified that it took place in Pickens, South Carolina, on a back road called Shady Grove Road. The wings were bat-like and appeared not to be covered in feathers, although I didn't get a good look at its body. It all happened so quickly. The wings were unmistakably large and distinct. It was at least as long as a windshield. From wingtip to wingtip, it seemed to be flying at an angle toward my car, but I'm unsure if it came over the hill on my right or from the field on my left. The area was quite dark, and it was rushing, almost impacting my vehicle. The creature was about the size of a man with extended wings, and its head had a somewhat triangular shape as well. So, what was this creature, folks? It had a triangle-shaped head that almost basically reminds me of various, pterodactyls I've seen basically online, folks. And I don't just mean from basically, about cryptids. I mean basically the remains of various pterodactyls, basically their fossils. I've seen their heads, and they kind of do have a triangle-shaped head or angle to them. So that's very interesting, folks. What was seen by RR? Was it actually some sort of bat, some sort of unknown species? It could have been a South American bat, folks, because they do get rather big, and maybe mistook it for maybe being as large as a man, folks, but we can't be for sure. Either way, let's move on to the next article. Stillwater, Nevada, praying mantis incident. 1994 alien encounter that left witnesses shaken. Let's get into this account about what these witnesses saw and how it affected them, folks. In 1994, a late-night drive through Stillwater, Nevada, turned into a chilling encounter when a couple stumbled upon a glowing cylindrical craft and its insectoid occupants. What unfolded next? Gun-drawn, bug-eyed beings retreating, and a mysterious gathering of nearly a dozen humanoids remains one of the most unnerving UFO encounters on record. In June 1994, in Stillwater, Nevada, a witness and his wife were driving through an isolated area during a late rain when they spotted what looked like an accident off to the side of the road. There were numerous flashing lights around the scene, so out of curiosity, the witness slowed down to see if he could help. As they approached, they thought they saw an ambulance, but it turned out to be an object resembling a large soda can laying on its side and resting on 3 legs. The object was a strange, somewhat creamy color with a bright red halo and more flashing lights visible around it. So, this sounds like a truly alien object that they were looking at, folks. Was this some sort of reconnaissance craft that these insectoid aliens were using, perhaps? And why were they in this area, and why were there apparently so many of them? Was this some sort of gathering? As I said, there were nearly a dozen humanoids there, folks, so maybe this reconnaissance, expedition was basically setting up camp there or something, and going to basically search out the area, perhaps? I mean, they couldn't have basically been wanting to camp long there, folks, because this was in the middle of basically Stillwater, Nevada, and something like this would have quickly drawn the authorities and the army to them, like basically a forest fire. But let's read on, folks, and then we can discuss this a little more afterwards. While they watched in fascination, the witness's wife suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. The witness turned to see 2 aliens approaching their car. These creatures had bug-like features with heads resembling those of praying mantises. However, they had humanoid bodies and were wearing bluish-gray jumpsuits. Terrified, the witness, who was armed with a gun, pulled it out and fired 2 shots towards the road in front of their figures. This seemingly startled the humanoids, who immediately ran back to their cylindrical craft as the witness began to speed away from the area. He looked back and saw about 9 or 10 similar-looking beings standing around the object. They did not witness the craft depart. And now, everyone, the source of this story comes from UFOs and Aliens Online. So, very interesting, folks. What were these alien beings? Were they really insectoids? From the fact that they had insectoid-like heads, you would think so, folks, but remember, the witnesses here say that basically these alien beings were wearing, they were wearing clothing. Bluish-gray jumpsuits, in fact, is what they described, right? Maybe these were Air Force or military officers, folks, that were out there for some reason. Maybe the insectoid masks were a disguise. So if anyone saw them, folks, they basically think that they were either aliens or maybe just some weirdos in, weird costumes. I'm thinking, folks, that in some cases, maybe people see what they think is, maybe what they hope are aliens, but in reality, they're just basically people, maybe military officers, as I said, folks, who are basically maybe testing out some sort of equipment or technology, and these people witness it. But in those cases, folks, it's not like they just see these beings just, walking around a spaceship like this, folks. Usually, the spaceship basically flies up over onto them, or they witness it, and it seems basically far more bizarre. That makes me think that in those cases, folks, those people were administered some sort of drug, and they were meant to basically witness this. In this case, folks, it sounds like these people came across this object, and that these people who were basically around it were planning some sort of fiasco, some sort of incident involving this UFO. Maybe they were going to drug someone, but these people came upon them and witnessed it before they could actually do it. So I'm thinking here, folks, like in some cases, perhaps maybe UFO events are staged by the government for one reason or another, and these people just happened to see it right before these people were able to do anything. But that's just me thinking here, folks. Now, with the original story that we read first, folks, with this bat-like entity that the witness saw, RR. In both cases, folks, both the story we just read and that bat-like entity, both stories are truly bizarre and makes you think what's actually real out there. Anyway, folks, we're at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics that are bad for you. You can use the YouTube link down below in the description or the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell that'll give you all future notifications. And please, share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video. So be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.